Hello and welcome to section 3, in which we will be creating GUIs with Python and the PyQt5 framework. In this section we will first install PyQt5 and then we will create our first GUI wizard. Then we will install PyQt's Visual Designer and use it to visually design GUIs. After that we will convert the designer generated UI code into Python code. We will then see how we can modularize our UI code. And in the end, we will connect our widgets to PyQt5 actions so they can do actually something useful. In this first video, we will install PyQt5 and create our first GUI wizard. We'll install PyQt5 and there's a URL you can look at. That's the installation documentation. Then once we've successfully installed PyQt5, we will create our first Python GUI wizard, as simple as possible. We will then call PyQt5 GUI methods. We will look at the code structure that every PyQt5 GUI has. We will then refactor our code into classes, and we will inherit both from first Q widget and then from Q application. Before we can use PyQt5, we have to install it because it doesn't ship with Python. And we can use simply pip install to install PyQt5. Now this is a command, pip install PyQt5. Just press enter. And of course I already have it installed, so for me it looks like this, but when you first install it, the output will be slightly different. So on a first clean install, you would see an output like this. And one thing interesting to notice is the version. So in the middle here it says PyQt5-5.12- and so on. And this will become a little bit interesting in the next video. So similar to tkinter, with PyQt5, once we've installed it, in only a few lines of code, we can create a fully functional GUI. And this GUI here has a default size. So the way it works, we from PyQt5, that's a folder, we import from PyQt5 Qt widgets, we import Q application and Q widget. So we have these two import statements, or we import those two. And Q application is used to create an application. We pass on sys.argv. So sys comes from sys, so we have to import sys as well. And we use it here when we run a PyQt5 GUI application. We can pass in arguments from the command line if you run it from the command line. And so we create an application here, we save it in a variable, then we use QWidget without anything inside the parentheses, which creates a top level window. That's the easiest way to create a PyQt5 window. And we save that in a reference, then we have to call show on it to show the actual window, our top level window. And then we call app_exec with an underscore at the end because Python has exec without an underscore, so in order to distinguish that from Python's keyword, it has a trailing underscore. So that's create the application, create the window, show the window, execute the application, and this execution gets typically wrapped in a sys.exit call. So why that is in case the application of PyQt crashes, will catch any exceptions and will exit cleanly. We can call a PyQt5 method, set window title, so that changes the window title. So when we run this, it no longer says Python up there, but it says title we gave it. And the typical thing is we put that in the middle here. So you create an application, we create a window, then later we show the window and we run the application. And all the rest of our code we'll be adding will go in between here, always. So that we look at that a little bit more later. So we can set many properties by calling methods from PyQt5. So here we can give it a specific size, the window, no longer the default one. So we are resizing the default size to 400 pixels wide by 300 pixels tall. So 400 by 300. And that's just one of the several things we can call. And as I just mentioned, there's a certain structure to every PyQt5 GUI application. And this shows the structure. It's the same what we just ran, the same code, but with comments explaining a little bit more. So first come the import statements at the top. Then we create the application. Then we create the window. Then we add widgets, call method, change attributes, and so on in this section in between here. After all of this, after we basically build up, create an application, after showing it, we have to run the application. So it's an application. So this is the typical structure every PyQt5 GUI has. So next we will refactor our code into a class. It's the same code basically, but restructured, reorganized, so to speak. So I call the class GUI, uppercase. In the beginning is a _init method. And here it's a convention to call it init UI in PyQt5. So in init UI, we call the widget, set the window title, and a name, create the application. And we create an instance of our GUI class, which automatically calls init, which then calls init UI, which creates the widget and sets the title. Then we call show on it, but this time we have to use the reference GUI, and within GUI self becomes GUI here. So GUI win show, we call this on our window, and then we do the rest here as before, sys exit and execute the application. It's basically the same code before, it's the same structure. But instead of being procedural, it's in a class, and you'll see in a moment why we are changing this to using a class. So now that our code is restructured into a class, we can use class inheritance. So here our GUI class inherits and extends QWidget. And in order to use it correctly, we have to initialize the superclass. So QWidget is our superclass. So we do super call.init that initializes QWidget correctly. And then we call init UI our method. And now we don't need to create the window separately anymore. Now, because we did the super init on QWidget, self now is our window. So self refers to everything in QWidget. So we call self set window title as before. And here we create the GUI and then just GUI show, no more GUI.win. and so on. So it's more direct, and you'll see in a moment why we're doing that. So it's the same window. We change the title here. But this time it's in a class with class inheritance. So we're inheriting from QWidget here because we had to import it. I've done that before. Next, instead of inheriting from QWidget, inherit from QMainWindow. And we do the resize here and the title. So it's still almost the same as before, but there's a big difference here. So because QMainWindow has lots of widgets that QWidget by itself doesn't have. So we are inheriting from now on from QMainWindow from here on forward. The rest, as you can see, is still the same. And here we go. One of many widgets that we can use from QMainWindow is a status bar. So here after init UI, after changing or setting the window title and setting the size of the window, I am calling a method I created. I called it addWidgets for now. And here we can call self, which is our QMainWindow, status bar show message. Built into it, all we have to do is use it. It's already there. So when we now run the code, it takes a little bit longer to pop up, but that's how it's going to be from now on. You can see text in status bar. So at the bottom here, PyQt5 QMainWindow comes built in with a status bar. All we have to do is create it and tell it what message to show. So that's one of many things. So that's the first time we really added a widget to the GUI. Just one more line of code. So the next thing we do here is we create a menu bar. So QMainWindow, PyQt5 comes with a menu bar. This creates a menu bar. Then we add a menu to it, call it file. Then we add a menu item to it. And we do that by first creating a QAction. That's a constructor passing itself and giving it the name of our menu item. So because its type PyQt5 is QAction, I called it new action. And then we add an action to our file menu. And this is our new action here. And we can also set the called set status tip. So that updates the status bar. So in these few extra lines of code, we are adding a menu bar with a menu item, and which updates the status bar. So when we run this, we have now a menu bar with a menu file. It's a menu, add menu file. When we extend it, we have a menu item. As you can see, when we hover the mouse over it, it updates the status bar. So it says new file here, that one here, set status tip, but only when we hover over it. So again, that is something really neat about PyQt5. It has lots of built-in widgets. We just have to find them and learn how to use them. In this video, we installed the PyQt5 framework. We then created a simple GUI using PyQt5. We looked at the basic code structure every GUI in PyQt5 follows. We then refactored our PyQt5 GUI to use classes, and we added some widgets.